Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're going to talk all about your story's theme. And this is really a subject that is helpful for writers at all different stages of the writing process. It can be really helpful at the very beginning of writing your book to think about what themes you want your story to address. This is something that's very helpful to think about along the way, to check in and make sure you're accomplishing your objectives. And then, of course, when you're at the revision stage, checking in to make sure that your theme is coming across clearly but not too clearly. You don't want to be hammering people over the head with it, but to make sure that it is cohesive, that it is aligned with your story's plot and its characters. This is a great guide, really, to make sure that your story is accomplishing what it sets out to do. So let's dive in and talk all things theme. So, one of the things I like to do with the writers that I work with is to reframe that whole idea of what a theme is. Theme is not a moral or a lesson or a snappy slogan that you can identify in a sentence. We get this idea, I think, from our elementary school days. Um, it's something a bit more nuanced and more interesting than all of that. Theme is really a pattern of meaning, and we create that pattern by showing what a protagonist in a story believes. Now, I want to be clear that this is instructive for both memoir writers and fiction writers. If you're writing memoir, you're the protagonist in your story. So you can be thinking about it that way. But theme comes across through what your protagonist believes, how the story that you're telling challenges those beliefs of your protagonist, and what the ending of your story ultimately reveals about that belief system and how it was altered because of the series of circumstances you throw in front of your character. A weak theme is something like love is important. That is just stating something obvious and not that interesting to dig into. A stronger thematic frame can often come to us as a question instead of a flat statement. So, for example, is love worth sacrifice? Can love survive a power imbalance? Digging into a more original approach to your theme and posing it as a question that could be answered a lot of different ways is really the secret to your theme's success. Great stories ask. They make us dig deep. They make us uncomfortable. They make us question assumptions. They don't provide heavy-handed answers. So, for example, Cinderella, one of the themes that you could identify in this story is the question, can identity be recognized across class and power boundaries? Wow, suddenly we realize there's much more complexity to the story. It's asking a harder question than we might originally assume when we're reading this children's story. A theme, or really any story that you are producing, will usually be making some kind of a thematic argument. So let me break down what I mean by that. At the beginning of the story, there is an assumption. In the middle, that assumption is challenged by everything that you're throwing at your characters. And in the end, there's a transformation that comes about because of that struggle. The theme is the result of that transformation. So we're going to look at Little Red Riding Hood as an example. In the beginning, there's an assumption that is held by Little Red Riding Hood. She's walking through the forest, she's feeling great, the sun is shining, and the belief that she holds is that the world is safe if you follow the rules. Her mother has given her a very simple task, she's going to follow it, and all will be well. But in the middle, that assumption is challenged. She meets the wolf. He seems nice enough. She is being deceived. And in the end, she has a transformed understanding that safety requires awareness, not just blind obedience. That is an example of a theme that gets challenged, and as a result, there is a transformation of your character. So when it comes to theme lives in all the nooks and crannies of your story. Sometimes in an early draft, we are putting a lot of our theme into our dialogue. This is a great place for us to dig in and kind of get our own footing and understand what our theme is by having our characters hash it out together. And that's perfectly fine for that stage. But Eventually, we want to make sure that we aren't being too heavy-handed and having our characters announce the theme to our readers. Instead, what we do is we want to sprinkle it through lots of different elements of our story, which include our character's arc, conflict, symbolism, setting, tone. We can use all of these devices in order to make our theme understood and clear. So let's take a look at The Little Mermaid. We're going to dip into all the classic children's stories today because they often are so good at illustrating these elements. So in The Little Mermaid, she wants to pursue love, the mermaid does. And unfortunately, the person that she falls for lives on the land, and she lives in the sea, of course, as a mermaid. And in order to grow legs, she has to make a great sacrifice, and that is her voice. So she can be with her love on land, but she will no longer have this voice. And that's the sacrifice she's contemplating for love. So when we look at the story and we think about the theme of The Little Mermaid, we can see in the character arc that she is giving up her voice to pursue love. And in doing so, she is experiencing a loss of self, which is the crux of this story's theme. We are looking at symbolism in this story. Voice equals the mermaid's identity and her agency, and without it, she loses both of those things. The setting, which is the ocean and land, really represents that divide between where she has agency and where she does not. And of course, the tone is longing and pain and anguish because she must make this really impossible sacrifice. She wants a life that is requiring her to abandon who she actually is. And we see all of that, and we see the difficulties it brings by the way that all of these different elements work together to put forward that theme. Your character is a device that you can use to put your theme forward. Your protagonist is essentially a test case for your theme. So they are going to usually be the person in your story who is holding on to some kind of belief that is false. Remember Little Red Riding Hood in our first scenario. And we want to think about how does your story dismantle that initial false belief that your character is believing in. Theme emerges from what your character learns the hard way. So again, think of The Little Mermaid, think of Little Red Riding Hood, all the things that happen to them in order for them to reach the truth at the end of the story. And that truth is where your theme lies. So there are all kinds of tests we run when we're writing our stories and we're working on revision. Um, this thematic cohesion test is one I like to do with writers. Ask yourself, do all the major conflicts in your story explore the same core tension? And we can have more than one theme in a story. For the sake of simplicity, I'm talking about I'm addressing it like there's one theme in your story. You can certainly have more than one. But for today, let's just think about the single theme. Ask yourself, do your subplots reinforce or distract from the theme? And does the ending resolve the idea, really dig into that theme, and not just simply tie up the loose ends of your plot? So let's take a look at Hansel and Gretel, another great example. We're going to run this story through the test I just explained. Do all the major conflicts explore the same core tension? That's our first question. In Hansel and Gretel, and of course, you can interpret these stories lots of different ways. This is my interpretation, but you could run a different theme through Hansel and Gretel and run it through the same test and see what you get. But the way I see it is this is a nice look at dependence versus self-reliance. So initially, the parents abandon Hansel and Gretel, and trust is broken. They stumble upon the witch. They mistake her as an ally of some sort because she provides them with fake, false kindness, and we don't initially know what her intentions are. So every single conflict that they run into is testing this movement from reliance on people who don't have their interests at heart toward the need for self-reliance. So our next question is, do subplots reinforce or distract from the theme? So these subplots, we've got the candy house. that they stumble upon and they begin nibbling on. This is dependence disguised as comfort. So it is a false promise of something that's going to make them feel good. Gretel's role begins to shift from passive to decisive as she realizes that more and more that the witch is not an ally, that is not looking out for their interest. We watch her start to summon some courage and start to plot a plan to break herself and her brother free. Each of these elements is pushing toward the idea that one cannot rely on others to save them. Does the ending resolve the idea, not just the plot? Well, Gretel outsmarts the witch, survival through awareness, and they return with resources because they're no longer naive and they're no longer depending on others. They are depending on their own wits. So that theme, survival requires agency, and it will be rewarded if you dig into those instincts that you have and you're into your own smarts, you will be rewarded. So Hansel and Gretel seems to pass the thematic test. Your ending is very important because it's carrying the theme forward. So sometimes writers come to me for coaching and they're really concerned that their ending isn't accomplishing what they set out to accomplish. And they're focused on all kinds of different things that can go wrong with an ending. But the first place I start when I'm evaluating your story's ending is, did your theme get carried forward? Does your theme get addressed in a way that's going to be satisfying to the reader at the ending? Because your ending is the clearest statement of meaning. It's not because of what's been said, but because of what has been chosen. It's not because your character told you the theme of the story is, it's because your character acted in a particular way that reinforces the theme that you are trying to put forward. So if we think of Gretel and a story that is all about independence and advocating for yourself, it's not that she said something to to her brother. It's not because she said something to the witch. It's because she acted on a conviction that she needed to save her brother and that she had the capacity to do so. So you want to ask yourself, what does the character believe now? And how is that different than what they started with? So you can ask yourself, what does my character believe now that is different than what they believed when they started? And what does it cost them? What has it gained them? These are all the kinds of questions we want to look at the end of our story. Theme is what the story leaves us with. It's that final impression. It's that final understanding that we are gleaning from the story in order to make sense of it, to make sense of what's happened, and to contextualize the theme in some meaningful way. So it's oftentimes in revision that we start to realize, oh, our theme is a little off. But sometimes writers will come to me earlier on and they will rightfully observe, oh, I don't really have themes in my story. I have this great plot or I have this great idea, but I don't really know what my story is about. And the sooner we can identify what our story's theme is, you'll oftentimes find the easier it is to write it. And I am all for pantsers, plotters, everybody in between. I think that these are all valid ways to get to the heart of our story and write the thing. But even pantsers, if they have a sense of what their theme is, will find that the writing process is much more enjoyable because they just have this guide. It's just a map that kind of helps you stay on track so that your story doesn't get away from you, so that you can kind of rein it in and know what you're writing toward. When your theme feels off, it usually means the belief is not clear. The conflict isn't really testing your theme. There's not enough tension. There aren't enough obstacles putting your theme through any kind of rigorous test. Or it's the ending doesn't complete it. You've maybe tied up all of the other threads really nicely, but your theme hasn't really been conclusively understood and proven. So, what do you want to do in revision? If you find that you are curious about your theme, you're not sure if you quite hit it, go back and look for where belief drives action. So in the case of Little Red Riding Hood, is that belief that as long as you follow the rules, nothing bad will happen. Find out where it's challenged. Of course, it's when she meets the wolf and gets led astray. And then where does that change? It's when our character perhaps gains agency and takes control of their lives and turns that belief upside down and approaches it in a way that makes more sense for who they've become. I hope that this was helpful for you. I would love to hear about your experience working with your stories theme. If you have any questions for me, just stick them right in the comments section. I'm always really happy to answer them, and I do read all of your comments. If this was helpful for you, I hope you'll like and subscribe to my channel. I drop new videos here every Tuesday. And also, if you would like to talk more about revision and really get into it deep, please check out my self-editing essentials group coaching program. This is how we talk all the time. I'll stick a link in the comments section with more information about this group. I would love for you to check it out. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. We have a really good time there. And finally, every Wednesday at 3 o'clock Eastern, I host a free writing sprint for anyone who wants to get together and just write for a solid hour uninterrupted. It's a super fun community. It's very relaxed. You just come when you can. And if you would like to learn more about this, please visit the link that I stick in the comments section, get you signed up, and you can join us anytime you would like. All right, everybody, happy writing.